So the other bit of advice that I like to give you as you're starting out is to try and avoid problems before they occur. So there's only a few common problems that happen, and a little bit of forethought and pre-planning can really help you avoid them. The major one is pests. People think, oh, I'm growing inside. There's no way that pests can get in on my crop. And it is true that you have extra isolation from the outdoors where all the pests are, but you've got a perfect environment inside where pests want to grow, so they can really take over if you let them. So we're trying to prevent them from coming in, we're trying to discover them before they take over, and we're trying to use multiple different types of controls when they do occur. Other things like letting your plants grow too big before you force them into flower. Cannabis is a plant that needs 12 hours of darkness in order to flower, most species. And if you let them go with 18 hours of light for years and years, they'll never flower. If you let a plant get too tall and then try to flower it, it's going to want to overgrow its surroundings, especially in an indoor garden. So you really want to try to keep things contained. So a little bit of forethought that way can go a long way. I see a lot of people, they think, oh, I want a 3-foot plant, so I'll wait till my plant gets 3 feet to flower it, where the plant actually wants to double in size once it hits the flowering period. So that can be another problem to avoid before it happens. So there's one main species. It's called Cannabis sativa, and all of the cannabis can interbreed. So the pollen from one to the bud of another can make a seed. So it's all one species. Like take tomatoes, for example. There can be lots of different varieties. So we've got big tomatoes, small tomatoes, purple, black, red, yellow, all the variation in between. And some are more consistent than others, and some are harder to keep consistent. The same is true with cannabis. There's currently probably thousands of different varietals stemming from maybe 10 different places where it was growing consistently in a single environment. You have strains from Thailand, strains from South America, a lot from Afghanistan. The plant originates in Asia, but was spread throughout the world. And, it's only in the last 100 years or so that the cannabis is now becoming very well bred, so to the point where there's many, many varieties. I don't think there's a count. I've seen literally thousands and thousands of different varietals, and a lot of times they'll be coming from one lineage. So one, OG Kush plant will make a branch that just explodes, and each one will have a different flavor profile and strength and growth structure. And even I'll take the seeds off of one plant, and each one of those seeds will be different slightly. One will want to grow tall, one will want to grow short, some will be potent, some will be fast flowering. So because we're using such a mixed bag to start with, the genetics of cannabis are currently not very stable. So that's why we see the next generation be very diverse. And so when it comes to breeders, when they're breeding a plant, they'll say, I want a plant that's pink, and it's got a certain flavor profile, and I know one of the phenotypes in the plants that I'm breeding is there. I'll find that plant and I'll breed it with other plants that look identical, and I'll do that a bunch of times until every time I grow a seed, it's got a 75% chance of being the variety that I want. And that's what you see from seed breeders. They've got a package of something that can be pretty sure there's a 80% chance that those seeds are going to grow how they say they're going to grow. That's how they can charge money for great white shark or all these different varieties. But if you were to take that seed and grow 2 seeds together, you've undone the breeding that they've done. And so you're going to get good plants, but they're not going to be consistent the same way they had in the original pack. Cannabis breeding can be a little difficult because of that. Grow room pitfalls, some of those problems that commonly occur that we want to try and avoid. So we want to try and keep a clean and isolated garden. So I have my grow tent here. I don't want to put it over by the front door because more chance of bugs getting on it from from that door there. Maybe I want to put it in a back room and keep that door closed all the time. I won't let my pets over there because they're carrying pests, whether it be some powdery mildew spores from outside or some spider mites, thrips, anything could be on that pet that's been outside, so we want to try and isolate it from that. If I'm forcing air into my tent to try and keep it cool, I don't want to take air right directly from outside and force it into the tent. I'll force air from the surrounding environment in the around the tent, or really filter well that air coming in so that I'm not bringing powdery mildew spores or spider mites or those sort of things. As well, keeping a clean garden. If I've got a lot of leaf litter, because older leaves will die and fall off, if you're not cleaning those up and making sure they're put in the dustbin, they're going to be a perfect home for different bugs and different mold spores to kind of live and reinfect the plants. So we want to keep it clean and isolated. Watch for changes in outdoor weather. Especially in our area, we can have huge swings from one season to the next, even one day to the next, in terms of temperature and humidity. And it will affect our indoor situation. So outside, it's about as dry as it can get. Maybe not today, but when it's really cold, there's no water in the air. And as air is brought into the home gets really dry, and that can be stressful for the plants. Finding ways to try and raise your humidity before the plants show stress, because you're checking it, can be a good thing. Same with, the high humidity in the summertime. If you're not running an air conditioner and you've got really moist air inside, you may want to run a dehumidifier in your grow room so that you're not having a ton of moisture on your plants. Moisture on your plants causes different molds to grow. Powdery mildew is a common one. It looks like a little white spot of fuzz of powdery dust that grows on the leaves, especially leaves inside the plant where there's, the air maybe isn't mixed up as well. And botrytis is another big problem. So that's bud rot, and it's really hard to detect if we've got a big bud here and there's a little bit of gray mold growing inside of it and killing the bud. You won't see that until the gray mold travels to the outside of the bud and killed the whole bud that you see that. In that case, with botrytis, I'd want to cut that whole bud off so it's not infecting everything else. I may even put a bag over it, tie it, and then cut it, because shaking it can release more spores. So just being careful and a little bit of problem solving ahead of time will be better. We can talk about regular versus feminized seeds. There's 3 basic types of cannabis seeds that you'll find in the market. Regular is the old style. Cannabis has a male and a female variant. Not many plants do. It's pretty unique in that sense, but there's a separate male and female individual. The female is the one that we're trying to grow because it's got the highest amount of cannabinoid, the medicine in it. So in those big buds, on the big bud, there's these little crystals that form. It's called a glandular trichome, and that is the main source of medicine production in the plant. The males make a little bit, but none really to be concerned about. So that's your first type of seed. The second type is a feminized seed. A feminized seed comes from a plant. They took a female plant and they stressed it out with some sort of condition. A lot of times they use colloidal silver, spray it on the plant. The plant thinks it's about to die, and it really is. And just as it's in its death throes, right at the last minute, it tries to put out pollen, and that pollen will be female. So the female plant will start to exhibit male traits. These pollen sacs are formed, and that pollen is now all female genetics. So if I take that pollen and pollinate a female plant, boom, all my seeds will be feminized because there was no male genes in the mix there. So you get all female plants from that.